Why hello there. So we've all been wondering how long it was going to take for Wizards of the Coast to figure that enough time had passed for everyone to have just kind of forgotten about that time they tried to deauthorize the open game license and replace it with a much more restrictive version and virtual tabletop policy. And apparently the answer to that question is 4 weeks, because that's how long it took after the end of OGL Gate for them to release the next 1D&D Dungeon & Dragon 6th edition playtest packet. You know, the playtest for the new edition of Dungeons & Dragons coming out next year that they have not expressed any intent to use the open game license with, or even suggested whether they will or will not bring back that virtual tabletop policy. You know, just something you might want to keep in mind while you're buying, like, every single piece of Honor Among Thieves merchandise. Anyway, this most recent playtest packet contains the Druid, the Paladin, and, of course, some miscellaneous rules updates. And in this video, I will be looking at the Druid, which you obviously knew because of the title and thumbnail of this video, but I still needed to bring it up for the purpose of having this transition to make the video flow well. So spellcasting for the Druid is basically the same as it was before, except that now they use the Primal spell list instead of the Druid spell list, and also can prepare a number of spells per day equal to the number of available spell slots. Instead of, I believe, a number of spells equal to their Wisdom modifier plus Druid level. And of course, when I say Druid, you think Wild Shape, and that is a thing that has undergone some moderate changes. So first off, Wild Shape is now a function of Channel Nature, which is like Channel Divinity, except they don't call it that. Also, the uses for Channel Divinity, and therefore Channel Nature, has been changed from a number of times per day equal to your proficiency bonus to twice, and then you get one use back after a short rest, and all uses back after a long rest. And I actually kind of like this. I'm sure I've mentioned before, I tend to like the abilities that you can use more regularly. So regaining one use on a short rest means that you'll likely be able to use it once in every encounter, even though it means you won't be able to use it 3 times in any encounter. Also, Wild Shape, along with Channel Divinity, has been moved to level 1 instead of level 2. And using Wild Shape still allows you to basically turn into an animal for a number of hours equal to 1/2 your Druid level. But how that is achieved is quite a bit different. Basically, now instead of turning into a beast of a specific CR or lower, you just kind of turn into an animal of the land, allowing you to transform into an unspecified small, medium, or large land animal, retaining your hit points, proficiency bonus, and all ability scores other than strength and dexterity, which are set to your wisdom. Your AC is set to 10 plus your wisdom modifier. You have dark vision 60 feet, a speed of 40, and advantage on perception checks. You also gain a bestial strike, which deals 1d8 plus your wisdom modifier damage. So basically, while in Animal of the Land form, you get to add your wisdom modifier to your AC, attacks, and damage. I guess someone over there at Wizards of the Coast is just really nostalgic for the good old days of 4th edition single attribute characters. Anyway, then at 5th level, you gain multi-attack, allowing you to make 2 bestial strikes, and a climb speed of 40. Then at level 7, you can wild shape into an animal of the sea, and at level 9, an animal of the sky. There are slight differences between all 3, which are all on screen right now if you'd like to look at them, but obviously an animal of the sea can swim and breathe water, and an animal of the sky can fly. Then at level 11, you can transform into a tiny creature, but only for 10 minutes, and you have your damage halved. At level 13, you can switch to your base form and back to your beast form, provided it is within 1 minute, without expending an additional use of Channel Nature. And at level 17, you can cast spells while in beast form. Although, you can always talk while in beast form now. I guess they figured it would just be asking too much to have an ability that might hurt a player's ability to just make themselves the center of attention at all times. So basically just more oversimplification that makes it easier to implement in the online subscription-based video game experience that Dungeons & Dragons is turning into. And another interesting little thing that they have changed is the language on what you can do in beast form, which now says you cannot use any other abilities, versus the 5th edition version which said you could use other abilities if your current form was physically capable of doing so. Which is, one of those things where, depending on what animal you are turned into and what ability you are trying to use, it has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis by the DM, which is a thing that's not that hard for a human to do, but very difficult for a computer. And it's much easier to just disable all of your other abilities while you're in beast form. Also, interestingly, this does mean you can now use Wild Shape to turn into a dragon. Because as mentioned earlier, you don't turn into a specific animal, it's just a generic template which you're supposed to just say is whatever animal you want it to be, and they even specify you can combine aspects of multiple animals together. So, yes, you can turn into an owlbear just like in the shitty movie trailer. But also, you can say, well, I am going to combine some aspects of a lizard and a bat and a giraffe, and if that's not a dragon, I don't know what is. Another kind of interesting thing is the fact that the beast of the land gets a climb speed as they level up, because most land animals do not have the ability to climb. So if you are using this playtest druid, you can just turn into a cow. You get the same stats as a bear, but also you get to be a cow that can somehow climb trees, because they never say at any point that any of this has to even come close to making sense. And they even specify that you do not have to be an appropriate size for the animal you are turning into. So you can just turn into a giant duck or a tiny little apatosaurus. Or, as just mentioned, a cow who can just kinda climb up walls. So, like everything else in this entire playtest, theming, lore, what are those? Of course a druid can turn into an unnatural abomination. Why wouldn't they? Druids love unnatural abominations. It's like their favorite thing. Anyway, moving along, I swear that was the worst of it. At 2nd level, you get 2 new uses for your channel nature. Healing Blossoms, which allows you to distribute your Wisdom modifier D4 healing to any number of creatures within a 10-foot radius sphere. And Wild Companion, which allows you to cast the Find Familiar spell, but without any material components, and then also it only lasts until your next long rest. So, Healing Blossom, I guess that's, okay at lower levels. And Wild Companion, I guess you save a few gold. However, then at level 15, when you use Wild Shape, you also get to use Healing Blossom for free as a part of the same use of Channel Nature. So as I said, Healing Blossom is the thing that seems like it's most effective at lower levels, so it is kind of nice that at much higher levels, they let you use it for free when you Wild Shape to make it a thing that continues being a relevant part of your Druid's toolbox. And then at level 18, you get the Archdruid ability, which, unlike the 5th edition version that just allowed you unlimited uses of Wild Shape, now lets you regain a use of Channel Nature whenever you roll initiative. And also they rolled Timeless Body into the same ability for some reason. And there was something similar with the Bard, where you got some ability back when you rolled initiative, and just kind of overlooked that at the time, because there was so much wrong with the Bard, but this is a thing I'm kinda not all that fond of, because it seems to be done with the assumption that you only roll initiative when you're going into combat, instead of just any time that the order in which characters act is relevant. And I can't help but feel like if you have characters who are regaining a resource every time they roll initiative, as a dungeon master, you are going to be using that tool only when it is essential instead of just when it is convenient. I mean, it's not like this actually matters though, considering that at most, maybe 2 to 3% of games actually reach level 18. And it does sometimes feel like these more higher level content exist more to facilitate the fantasy of what a high level character could be, instead of like the actual reality of those characters existing. It's like the sort of stuff that you look at and you go, wow, my character is going to be so cool at level 20 when I have this and that and the other thing. And then you never get to level 20 because most games do not. And speaking of level 20, the epic boons are still here apparently. You know, those special level 20 feats that they are putting a lot of attention on, despite the fact that they will be used in, you know, generously like 0.1% of games. Apparently, according to the survey results, the epic boons were not epic enough, so now you get to add +2 to one of your ability scores when you get the epic boon, in addition to the epic boon. And the epic boons themselves have been beefed up a bit, but I will get into that in the miscellaneous updates video. And finally, there is the Druid subclass, formerly known as the Druid Circle, and the only one provided here is Circle of the Moon, so let's look at that. You now get the subclass at 3rd level instead of 2nd, because that is the new standard. All classes get their subclass at 3rd level. And at 3rd level, you get Combat Wild Shape, which in 5th edition allowed you to Wild Shape as a bonus action, and also expend a spell slot to heal yourself for 1d8 damage per level of the spell slot expended. The playtest version still allows you to Wild Shape as a bonus action, but now also lets you make an unarmed strike as a bonus action, which is a thing that the rules don't ever say you cannot do while in beast form, but it is still a little weird. And in place of that unique healing ability, you have the ability to cast abjuration spells while in Wild Shape. And abjuration spells are generally where the healing spells live. You no longer gain access to higher CR beast forms as you level up because, you don't actually turn into any specific animals. And you no longer get to count your natural attacks as magic at 6th level. Maybe because magic attacks aren't a thing anymore. Maybe they are. Who knows? And then, of course, you don't get the ability to turn into an elemental at 11th level because, once again, you don't actually turn into the things anymore. However, you do get a different ability called Elemental Wild Shape, which allows you to choose an element, and then when you Wild Shape, you can gain resistance to that element and deal damage with your bestial strikes of that elemental type. So you can then turn into a Fire Cow, or a Lightning Cow, or an Ice Cow. Hypothetically, you could turn into animals that are not cows, but based on the rules, there's no actual reason to ever do that. And then at 6th level, you get an extra d6 elemental damage when you do the Lightning Cow thing, and I believe that goes up to 2d6 at level 17. And finally, Thousand Forms, which functions exactly the same, but is written very differently. And that was the 1D&D Dungeon & Dragon Druid. Overall, there's just not that much to mess up here. Druids basically have 2 abilities. They have spellcasting, and they have Wild Shape. And if I was not clear about it earlier, they kind of really messed up Wild Shape. And they can say whatever they want about the reasonings behind this change, but I feel like we all know that those are lies. This was 100% to make Wild Shape something that is easier to implement in an app-based interface. Instead of having literally dozens of options when you first get Wild Shape, you now have 3. Small Animal of the Land, Medium Animal of the Land, and Large Animal of the Land. I mean, if we want to be really generous, we could say 9, because each of those can have bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage. And it's just feeling more and more evident that this iteration of Dungeons & Dragons is being designed for the D&D Beyond virtual tabletop experience first, and traditional tabletop play not at all. Because I don't think anyone would be surprised at this point if it turned out that they viewed sharing books at the table to be a form of piracy. And I guess that is it for the Druid. They added Channel Nature, which I don't hate on its own, but being part of the overall theme of making everything overly uniform, I'm not incredibly fond of. They ruined Wild Shape, which I said lots of things about. They added Healing Blossom, which I thought was okay, and that other one that lets you cast Find Familiar. But, not much else. It kind of feels like they are finally realizing the goals that they set for 4th edition. Except this time, the virtual tabletop might actually come out. Of course, maybe we'll be lucky and history will repeat itself. The virtual tabletop will just, never materialize. We'll have 4 years of this really substandard system, and then they'll just give up and make another real edition of the game. I'm just kidding. They're not going to do that. Anyway, that is it for this video. I will be back taking a look at the Paladin, unless I just kind of decide not to, because that is actually a very real possibility right now. And thank you for watching, with extra special thanks to my Fight and Flail Snails, Samuel Gorski, Ranty Mulholland, and Toshirokuro. If you'd like to be cool like them, you can check out my Patreon, where you can get early access to videos and fun stuff that I make for the Patreon. But if you don't want to do that, that's cool too. You can still hit all the lovely buttons, like, subscribe, these other videos which either myself or the cold heartless YouTube algorithm have lovingly selected for you, which I'm sure are lovely videos that you will also enjoy. And I will see you next time.